We're going to look a little bit more closely at the idea of total war, which the North uses to help in their war against the South. And we're going to be focusing on the years of 1863 and 1864, when the North's strategies of total war start to enjoy some success. Here are your video goals. So we already mentioned in earlier videos that the North begins to implement the strategy of total war after its initial failures to capture the southern capital of Richmond in the Battle of Bull Run and the Peninsular Campaign. And you'll remember that the basic idea of total war is not just attacking enemy armies, but rather targeting the South as a whole. So attacking its economy, its people, and its way of life. And Abraham Lincoln is reported to have shifted to the idea of total war sometime after these first two failures of the Northern Army. And he says, quote, "The character of the war will be changed. It will be one of subjugation. The old South is to be destroyed and be replaced by new propositions and ideas." And so the four major strategies of total war that are implemented after this point are emancipation, which we already talked about, and how freeing slaves would break the southern plantation economy and provide more troops for the North. The blockade, which is using the Northern Navy to block southern ports and prevent trade. Controlling the Mississippi, which will cut the Confederacy in half and take over its major river. And destroying Southern territory, which will reduce the resources available to the Confederate Army. Let's look first at the blockade. So the basic idea of the blockade was that the South depended on trade with Europe to get most of its manufactured goods, like guns and boots and stuff like that. And so the idea was that the USA could use its awesome navy to block trade from going in or out of southern ports. What this would mean is that the South would find it hard to get enough supplies for its army, since it can't really make very much stuff on its own. And so this seems like a pretty good idea, but there are a couple challenges. One challenge is that the South begins building these ships called blockade runners that are super fast steamships that are basically designed to escape out of southern ports before the North can stop them. And for a while, these are really effective and are able to bring in a bunch of supplies to the South in spite of the Northern blockade. Another big challenge is this new kind of ship called an ironclad. And you can see a picture of the ironclad down there at the bottom. And this is a ship coated in plates of iron, so it's kind of like armored. And this makes it immune from cannon fire and makes it easy to destroy the blockade ships that are blocking southern ports. However, the North is able to overcome both of these challenges. It comes up with a system for catching blockade runners and makes them pretty much ineffective. And to counter southern ironclads, the North begins producing its own ironclads. And it can produce a whole bunch more of these because it has a bunch of factories and stuff like that. So eventually they're able to shut down both of these special types of southern ships, and they're able to successfully block most southern trade and deprive the South of basic items essential for the war effort. Stuff like shoes become a rarity in the South in the last years of the war. Of Northern total war against the South was the conquest of the Mississippi River. And the basic idea here was that the Mississippi River was super important because it ran right through the middle of the Confederacy and was a major trading route for the Confederacy. And so if the United States could control the Mississippi, it would cut the Confederacy in half and block a lot of their trade. But this too had faced several challenges. The major challenge here was that the Confederacy had built forts all along the Mississippi River. And in order to take control of the Mississippi River, they would have to conquer all of these different forts. And at first this seemed impossible, but when Northern General Ulysses S. Grant takes control of the Army and the Navy on the Mississippi, he is able to conquer all of the major forts and to successfully capture the Mississippi. Most famously, in 1863, he captures the fortress of Vicksburg, and that opens up the path down to lower Louisiana and to control the entire Mississippi. The next total war strategy employed by the North was basically the general destruction of Southern territory. And the basic idea here was, rather than just trying to defeat the main Confederate army, which was really strong, commanded by Robert E. Lee, instead they were going to go around behind the main army and destroy the Southern territory itself. And so by destroying farms and towns, they would be able to weaken the South by depriving the main army of food and supplies. Basically, they would cut the main army off from the Southern backcountry. But there are some major challenges here. One is that smaller Southern armies still stand in the way of the North. So they're still going to have to beat these other Southern armies. And on top of this, the entire population of the South is against the North. So this army that marches down into Georgia is basically surrounded by enemies. And these people are going to do whatever they can to hurt the Northern army and help the Southern army. The main result of this is a smashing success. The army that eventually invades the Deep South is William Tecumseh Sherman, who is a pretty brilliant general, and he is able to defeat the Southern army that's guarding the capital of Georgia, Atlanta, and he's able to march into Atlanta and burn it to the ground in 1864. After taking Atlanta, there's really nobody left to resist Sherman, so he goes on to march all the way across the state of Georgia, all the way to the coast. And as he goes, he destroys everything in his path, burning towns, destroying farms, tearing up railroads. You can see a picture there of Sherman's soldiers tearing up the tracks. And after he marches all the way to the sea, then he turns northward and marches north to take the southern capitals of Columbia, South Carolina, and lastly, the capital of North Carolina, Raleigh. And that's at the very end of the war in 1865. So Sherman basically takes 3 whole southern states out of the war. Basically, the North is still struggling to defeat the main Confederate army under Robert E. Lee. But it does succeed in all of its different total war strategies. The Emancipation Proclamation, which we talked about in our last video, effectively reduces the number of slaves in the South and reduces the effectiveness of the slave system, and it provides thousands of new recruits for Northern armies. The blockade is successful and it blocks the major Confederate ports. Grant is able to capture the Mississippi and cut the Confederacy in half, with Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas on one side and all the other states on the other. And William Tecumseh Sherman is able to destroy major southern cities and to destroy important agricultural areas as well. And the effects of these successes are major. It reduces the South's access to crucial supplies, stuff it needs to keep fighting the war, stuff like boots and food. It reduces the South's manpower by depriving it of slave labor, which is the backbone of its whole economy. And it eventually makes it easier to defeat the main Southern army up in Virginia. And so, in short, we can conclude that the strategy of total war that Abraham Lincoln shifted to after the first initial failures of the Northern Army effectively win the war for the North. And what we're going to look at tomorrow and the next couple days is just a few final campaigns that end the war, but that really result in a Northern victory because of the effectiveness of these total war strategies. All right, here are your goals again. See you tomorrow.